Welcome to the Staff and Trenchcoat. I'm Raymond Magdalene, here as always with my co host Pope Jupiter.
Hello.
Today we are going to be talking about John Dies at the End by Jason Pargin. Is that how it's pronounced?
Pargin.
Pargin. And this is a horror slash, I don't know, I guess it's almost like a surrealist kind of situation. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's usually described as like psychedelic horror.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Um, but yeah, surrealist would also fit.
And this was your pick, so I'll just jump in. I,
Absolutely.
I struggled a little bit with this one. It is exactly the kind of thing that I normally would not read. I don't watch horror movies, and even though this is kind of a parody, I think that's fair to say. It's definitely tongue in cheek. Uh,
Definitely a satire for sure. Yeah.
yeah, I guess maybe parody's the wrong word. Satire is probably more accurate. Yeah, so I did struggle with that a little bit, but as a discrete object, I thought that it was enjoyable. The narrative style is very chaotic in comparison to everything else that we've read on the podcast. And the expectation of the reader, I think, is quite a bit higher than certainly the urban fantasies that we've read. And I
Hmm.
did struggle, particularly in the middle sections, with kind of following who was doing what. There's a lot of leaps and jumps from one moment to the next that I thought were very jarring. But if you like horror, thriller, that type of a thing, I think this is fine. It was certainly written well. I mean, I have some criticisms, but I mean, he's written three or four more books in the series. I think they made a film that got accepted at the Sundance Film Festival. So, it's going to be kind of difficult to make any general, outcry against the novel's quality as a piece of art. I think most of my criticism is going to come down to personal taste. But I mean, how was it for you?
I mean, I would just first of all say that I think we have made it the mission statement of this podcast to destroy Brandon Sanderson. So going after Jason Pargin is not out of the realm. But I enjoyed the book overall. I agree. It's it got tough to follow, especially in the audiobook where the narrator did not do a great job of differentiating voices. The many conversations between John and David were two guys with the same voice talking to each other. So it got a little tough to follow sometimes. It helped that Jason has a decent grasp on the voice of the different characters. So with some thought, I could figure out if I lost who was talking, I could kind of pick it back up. But it was uh, still confusing at times. Um, and just to kind of segue into, I already mentioned the audiobook. So more than any other, so this book more than any other we have read, I feel depends on the physical page. I kind of came to this conclusion after the chapter with the chat transcript,
Yes.
which in the audiobook was read literally with no change in how, like, if I were to read a chat transcript so that it would be legible for an audio listener, I would say user uh, Apocalypse Kitten or whatever their name was says blah. User XX69X says blah. Like I would think about what this would sound like and try to make it more listenable, more useful to a sound listener. But it was very hard to follow as an audio medium. And the way that you already mentioned that you were confused sometimes by the way time hopped around. That's even worse when I was listening to it.
Okay, I wondered if that would be the case based on, because I mean there were just kind of a lot of little objects in the text, and at the very end of the book, it goes into it was that a journal article or
Yes.
something like that? Was that also difficult to follow on the audio?
No, although it was a little jarring the way it went from the narrative to the journal, without I don't even really remember exactly how the actual narrative concluded.
Well, and
Um,
it's worth mentioning too. There was a little thing stuck at the end that was like an afterword for the special edition or something like that. I did not read that because I didn't know if that would have been included in the audiobook or not. So
it
for
was not.
okay, so for
I
me the narrative ended, you had the little journal article and then there was the section where they kind of like see these other people going into a portal,
Right, there's the bit with the portal, yeah.
and that was kind of where the narrative took off. But was the narrator good as a, just like as a reader, or was it a combination of the text was difficult to follow in audio format and the narrator was did a poor job?
So aside from the issue with, like I said, John and David sounding the same, they actually did a very good job, I think, of, the narrator did an excellent job of making it sound like this was David Wong telling the story. They were very good at changing their inflection and thinking about how they were, speaking in a way that definitely enhanced the voice that Jason Pargin put into the character. But again, there were some confusing things because of similar sounding voices.
Yeah, and generally speaking, I've spent a lot of years doing university work, and so my reading comprehension levels should be fairly high. But I'm out of practice, and we've been reading a lot of books that are, I mean, fantasy and urban fantasy. I don't think are genres that are known for their, intense challenge level for the average reader. I think for the most part, you're able to follow the narratives, even if you're just kind of half asleep reading at the end of a night. And this book, I did find that twice in a row I tried to read right before bed as I was laying there, and I had to just do something else because it was like, yeah, I need to be awake and paying attention, or I'm going to be confused.
Yeah, I probably should have rewound more than I did, but because there were definitely times I was like, wait, I missed something. I understand the story,
Well,
and it is
and the whole novel had a very specific style about it where you would get a little bit of down downtime, as it were, where there were descriptions and dialogue. And then at a paragraph break, he would just do a one line paragraph that said something like, and then the toilet turned into a monster made out of water bottles and fish. And
yeah.
all of a sudden, you're just in a different mode immediately. And I thought at the beginning of the book that that was the hook that was going to draw me into a more standard style, but he never lets up the entire novel. It's that way all the way through. And so it feels like you're in like a bumper car or something and you just keep hitting something else every 5 seconds. So,
I actually kind of I don't know if I explicitly did this with you when we were talking the other night, but it actually kind of reminded me of a horror themed version of Mel Brooks. You know how in a Mel Brooks movie, like there's a gag every minute, like it's just constantly throwing things at the wall to see what sticks.
yes.
And this felt like a horror themed version of that. It's just so many different horror tropes and situations and scenes and whatever. And none of them last very long, but the overall impression is of a constant state of horror.
And I found that for me there was about a 25% success rate. I don't think it was a very funny book. I definitely there was no laughter. I didn't laugh out loud a single time. I thought some of the stuff was kind of cute, and I got the impression that if I was a fan of horror, that more of the stuff would have been at least chuckle worthy. But even given that, I still think it was a very much it was an aim and spray style. He was just hoping that some of the stuff would be funny.
I actually thought some of the comedy was funnier than it was, or that than you thought. Mostly because the absurdity and surprise worked for me. But the body horror definitely didn't. I'm actually very much in agreement with you that this is not the kind of thing I would have gone in for on my own. I didn't know it involved this much like explicit body horror. I thought it was gonna be more of I don't know, something like do you remember that old show Reaper?
Yeah,
Something like that where it's like two losers saving the world, and uh it's a little crazy and zany, uh but I did not expect the body horror.
yeah, that was his main tool throughout the text. I would say that you could probably even just classify it just was a body horror novel.
Right.
Uh, I mean, a couple people get shot, but that's mostly to serve as the vehicle that allows for the next body horror section to play out.
Yeah, the violence in this is mostly just I mean, there's a lot of shooting and discussion of body parts, but it's mostly in a shocking or gross out way. A lot of mention of dicks and vomit, and well, not so much vomit, but especially shit. Feces it features very prominently in this
Yes,
narrative.
another novel where here we are trying to figure out what the fuck is people's obsession with poop. We had Age of Ash, where it was a straight up fantasy where it was just constant reminders that people poop. And
Though you
here,
see, it is their response to a dirty and disordered society.
yes, 10 out of 10 accent there. Yeah,
Duncan.
the the book is full of bodies being dismembered and altered or not being what they seem, and tons of insects,
Yes.
lots of bugs. You know, as I was reading the section where there was the giant centipede thing, I actually went into the back of my basement here and had a battle with a real centipede, and so that kept my eyes open for a little bit. You know, one of those like 4 inch long monstrosities that'll just you'll see it on the side of a wall.
Yeah.
So that was fun, and but in general, I definitely would not want to read another book in this series, and the the bugs and the body stuff and the poop and yada yada was just it was a little bit much for me. Maybe I'm just a prude in that sense. But I don't want to jump away from the violence just yet because there are battle scenes, but I don't think anybody dies really in the whole book that doesn't end up having been some kind of a ghost or phantasm.
The only people who do are the people who are implied to be taken by the shadow people.
Right.
So yeah.
And so there's not the stakes are and maybe that's a segue into another discussion point, but I mean why not? The I had trouble being invested in the stakes of the events that were happening because everything was so calamitous and chaotic all of the time that you there was no weight behind anybody getting shot or any of the events that were happening because you just know that in the next couple paragraphs he's all of a sudden just going to say and then and then some crazy shit's going to happen.
Yeah. Near the end when Amy explodes, my thoughts were, so she's gonna come back.
Well, and she does.
Yeah, and when she does, like, okay, there she is.
And John
Um,
does not die at the end.
yeah, that was one thing I was like, what? And John is like the one person who actually no one ever checks John's feed as far as I remember. So he very easily could also be a doppelganger or whatever. But
A shadow person.
yeah,
Yeah, the title, I didn't get it. I don't get it. It didn't. It doesn't make any sense to me. Because not only does John not die, but he seems to be not even a person. Because he kind of like disappears, and then the dog talks in John's voice, and then he's talking to John through a bratwurst, and I mean it gets wacky.
yeah. So I decided to look up the actual provenance of it, and it does explain quite a bit. So Jason Pargin is maybe 40. Jason Pargin is oh no, he's 49. He started writing this story in 2001.
Okay, so when he started writing it when he was a little bit younger than we are now,
Yeah,
3 or 4 years younger.
that does
I don't think that explains anything, but
uh-uh. I mean, I think it does go a long way to, in my opinion, go a long way to explain a lot of the humor. Uh Humor was a lot different in 2001, but yeah, I didn't realize he worked on it for that long.
yeah, because when was it published?
So it was published as a web serial beginning in 2001. Looks like it would have been finished, put into an edited manuscript in 2004, and a printed paperback in 2007.
Okay, well, I mean, the serialization of it would kind of explain
Yeah,
some of the weirdness here. I would also say, we are kind of at a point where we're trying to put our episodes together at a fast clip. If I had read this over the course of 2 or 3 weeks instead of 2 or 3 days, then I think I would have enjoyed it more if there had been
yeah,
more breaks, because it the octane level is too high to just sit in. This is not something that I think is a good binge read.
I agree. This is definitely something that, uh, if we'd had another week, I would have listened to this again.
Right. Well, what do you say about gender and sex?
I mean, as much as any character is a character in this book, the women are women. I don't really know what to say here because it just did I miss it? Did I overlook it commenting on gender?
No, in fact, I was surprised that you even brought up gender or sex in when we were putting together our bullet list, because I think more than any other novel that we've read, it sounds like you are in the same boat as I am, and that we are just kind of underqualified to analyze the text. But also, it's just not doing anything. I think any of the characters you could have just changed their name to a girl name, and poof, presto, their gender is swapped. Uh, there was no. The characters were just not very well done, I don't think. They were very flat. I couldn't really tell the difference between one character and the next. Because, and again, I think it all goes back to the central theme of the rant that we're collectively doing here, which is that the chaos level and the absurdity of the text is the primary feature, but kind of the only feature. Because also, I guess like petty alert, but I just kind of thought the story was stupid. I mean, you've got these guys, they go to a party, and this quasi racistly written Jamaican character appears and drugs/kills everybody. And then the rest of the story is just about how the soy sauce, the drug, sort of gives them powers, but the powers are awful and no one would want them. And the events that happen around them taking this drug are so crazy that you're not given, there's nothing else for you to grab onto, that there isn't any character development because there's nothing happening in the text that would cause a character to develop. It's just one insane event after the other, and the only plausible, character arc that would occur would be from a sane character to a mental asylum patient. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Because I mean, there's no character that would go through what happens in this book, and they start off, as this, really deep, multi-layered, complex character, and then have a change of heart through the course of the novel, and at the end they're a better person. Like, no, that couldn't happen here because it's just one crazy thing after the other, and not only does the reader not really know what's going on and have no idea what's coming in the next page, but neither do any of the characters. The only exception, I guess, would maybe be Arnie, and that's because he's static to the, he's sort of like pushed into the framing device, but then even he turns out to be like a ghosty at the end.
yeah.
And so I just don't think it had a lot to say about gender and sex. And then I guess real quick, does it fuck? I did I miss a sex scene or something?
Not an explicit sex scene, but there's a scene between Amy and David near the end where she comes back from Utah and they barely make it across, and they basically tear each other's clothes off going across the room.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And then there's also his relationship with Jennifer Lopez,
Right.
which gets referenced repeatedly, particularly the candle wax scrotum incident.
Yes. Okay. So it fucks weird.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, like
Uh,
everything else, it fucks
yeah. He
weird.
doesn't. He doesn't let up for there to be a, like a regular interaction. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of where we'll leave that. And then I want to talk about the slurs. Did you have some preface that you wanted to say to that before I just rant?
I mean, the only like explanation is that it was written by a 20 something in 2001.
No, no,
That is a
it was written by a, if he's if he's
if he's
almost 50
49
now,
now in 2024,
right?
49 minus 23 is 26.
All
So he
right.
would have been in his mid to late 20s when he wrote it.
Uh
That's a little
I
different.
I don't buy that for half of a fucking second. Uh I mean, I the numbers are real, but the it was a different time and it was a 20 something. That does not, there was no reason that he needed to have hard R's in this text, and there was no reason he needed to throw around the F slur. And what else was there? Those were the two that stuck out to me.
Yeah, I didn't really hear any other slurs, which is actually somewhat damning in its own way.
When you throw in also that the Jamaican character was, that was really weird, and I thought vaguely racist, and none of it served the narrative. This wasn't like a highbrow literary text about the human condition where you needed those slurs written out in full to get the point across. It really did just seem to me like he was sitting there going, "Heh, what's the edgiest thing that I could do next? I'll just use the N word." And then he published it.
Yeah.
And I asked you this before, but like, and the author is just like a regular white guy, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, his politics and personality are pretty based and cool, but yeah, he's a normal white guy who has uh made his living as a writer.
Yeah, it hit really weird for me to see those words used in the way that they were used. And again, I don't think it served the narrative, and I don't think he was going for immature frat douchebag writes a novel. I don't think that's what he was after. I got the impression that, and given that it became a Sundance film, and he's obviously pursued this novel for a very long time, this was meant to be a serious work that bent genres and had a difficult writing style, and he was it was a book of it that was meant to be read as every word being intentional. The choice to include those words I thought was cringe, maximum cringe. Like that, I would use this book if I was teaching a class and I wanted to differentiate between like where, as a white author, you might want to use a word like that and where you wouldn't. This would be an example of a text that I would say, like, this is how you don't do that. You don't just throw these words in for shock value or at random just to because you think it's cool or whatever. I wasn't able to figure out any reason that they would be in there other than, like I said, just to be a cringe lord.
Yeah, I agree. They were primarily used for shock value. The first one where he described the people in the town, that one is maybe defensible, but it's a weak defense. The usage in the latter portion, especially David just saying to Arnie, he called you N-word?
Right.
Like that was like, hold up. No, 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 he did not say that.
Yeah. And you know, transitioning a little bit here to some of the quotes that I have, a lot of the humor wasn't funny in 2010 either. So I guess like maybe that's the core like fight that we're gonna have in this episode is I the time in which it was written does not excuse the language choices, and it doesn't. I don't think if we had read this right when it came out that it would have been more funny. For example, it's a lot of jokes like you know, David describing John saying, "Now John has eyesight problems because of his constant masturbation." I mean, it really is just kind of like clown shit.
I feel strange about this because that was internet humor in the naughties and into the teens. That was what I mean. Maybe it was just on the websites and forums I was on, but and I'm not saying it was good or that this was. I'm saying this is exactly. I didn't realize this was written in 2001. This is exactly what I would expect something like this written in 2001 to look like, and words and all.
Okay, I mean, I just don't buy that. We'll have to agree to disagree. You know, in fairness, I did like at the. I think this is towards the very beginning of the book, at like page 13. They're in that house and they're fighting the meat monstrosity,
Mhm.
and he says, "We both know the drill. We had to draw the thing out somehow." John handed me his lighter. "You light some candles. I'll go stand in the shower naked." And then he goes in there and turns the light off and starts saying like, "Oh man, it's really dark in here." Uh, I mean, that was kind of funny. I got like, you know, I can't believe I haven't said this until now. This is like a much weirder and less funny novelization of one of the scary movie films.
Yes,
It very much like is that, but just not good.
which is saying something because I don't think any of the scary movie films were good except maybe the very first one.
I thought the first two were pretty funny. But of course, I was a little kid, and so
Yeah.
the you know fart and cum jokes were they were hitting home. But again, I in 2001 he wasn't writing this book for 12-year-olds. I assume.
12 to 24.
Okay,
I mean, it was the internet. It was the internet in 2001. It wasn't a place that everyone was on. It was a place that young dudes almost exclusively were on.
right. You know, or same section of the book. They're walking through the house and he's yelling like, "Yes," I answered loudly. "Perhaps we should split up." Uh, and Am I wrong here? But isn't, I mean, that's getting pretty close to just straight up stealing from Scary Movie. Like, isn't that exact joke in those films? I guess maybe it's one of those things where they're both kind
I mean,
of
it probably is, but I mean, they're all aping, every mystery horror movie ever where they decide to split up and it's a bad idea, and the joke.
right. Or page 37, he's talking to Jennifer, I think it is, and then he has an internal monologue where he's like, "She's getting away, tackle her." You know,
That was one of the other confusions in the audio book, was not differentiating between inner monologue and actual verbal speech. And a lot of times I had to be like, that had to be inner monologue. There's no way he actually said that.
no, it was. I think it was italicized.
Yeah, I'm saying that it was not clear in any way when it was inner monologue and when it was spoken aloud, except by context clues of how absurd what was just said was.
Right. Another example here. This is from a little bit later in the text, page 59. Uh, Now, I'll try to explain without cursing, but the black shit that came out from that motherfucker looked like it had grown fucking hair. And again,
I,
it's
I actually laughed at that. I thought that was
oh
funny.
god damn it.
I
Uh,
I do have a child sense of humor
I
sometimes.
guess because that's what I mean. We're literally. I mean, that's just you know. I, I I don't know if I can even throw any stones here because I mean I have a joke in my novel that does hinge on like the profanity for its own sake. But this seemed it's too slapstick for me.
It's possible it was the author's delivery because he very stridently pronounced and enunciated each swear. So it was that shit that motherfucker spewed out. So
Okay.
it's possible that delivery was what got me. But yeah, I remember that and cracking up.
All right. So mixed response there. Page 79. This is a little bit of a longer one. I don't have any cash. I had $5 and I just spent three of it on the bratwurst. That bratwurst was $3. Holy crap. Okay, give me a second. All right. Check between the sausage and the bun. You'll find $100 bill folded up in there. Encouraged that maybe all this black magic could actually produce something positive, I fingered around under the sausage for a few seconds. Nothing here, John. And then John says, "Okay, I guess I can't do that. Do you have your ATM card?" And so, I thought that was funnier.
Yeah,
The irreverence and I'm not even sure what the word is there for that. There's a little bit of the breaking of the fourth wall adjacent concept there. Um,
it just occurs to me that in that scene, it seems like Pargin originally intended John to get his to get to have the ability that the shadow people or what have you are supposed to have, that they talk about near the end, to go back in time and essentially edit reality.
right. A little bit later in the book, 118. I liked this one. This is where the thing is trying to assemble a monster out of their bodies. Uh,
Hmm.
Man, I think he's gonna make a fucking suit of human skin using the best parts from each of us. Holy crap, John said. He'll be gorgeous. And again, is that it's
John's unending narcissism was a pretty funny recurring gag.
yeah.
I thought it was just over the top enough.
If I die, I want you to tell everybody I died in the coolest way possible. Dave, you can have my CDs. My brother will demand the PlayStation since I borrowed it from him a year ago, so don't fight him for it. I thought that was one of the most dating passages in the whole book.
Uh huh.
But again, if it's 2001, like you're still, I don't even know if PlayStation 2 had come out yet.
Yeah, it had. But honestly, just calling it a PlayStation like that was unintentionally timeless because people still call their PS5s their PlayStation.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like, um,
Here's one I wanted your take on. This is 176, so about halfway through the book, give or take. If you think it's weird getting a bratwurst from a McDonald's, then you're not from the Midwest. What the fuck is he talking about?
I know McDonald's sold hot dogs for a while.
There's no McDonald's that I've ever been to where you could get a bratwurst. We are Midwest. Like this is
Right.
we're right on the Mississippi in Iowa. We're straight up Heartlanders. Uh, Never even heard of that shit before. I don't know if maybe like I is he from the Midwest?
Lawrenceville, Illinois.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe somewhere in like Southern Illinois or something they had bratwursts. I'm not gonna call him a liar, but that seemed like a really egregious misrepresentation of the Midwest there. Who the fuck wants to get a bratwurst at McDonald's?
Um, so I'm finding evidence. It looks like it was a Wisconsin thing. Uh, it looks like they are on the menu in some Wisconsin. They were on the menu occasionally in some Wisconsin McDonald's.
Okay,
Yeah, Milwaukee.
fair enough. So
So
next one, go ahead.
I also was like, I've never heard of a bratwurst at McDonald's, but I accepted it. I decided to Google it on a whim there.
Right.
I also have an explanation for the title that sounds plausible.
All right. Well, hold that thought. I've got just a couple more quotes I want to get through.
That's fine.
And so this is much later in the book, 337. With that, a thought passed through my head, a flash like a shooting star. Pro wrestling was real, but not real in the sense that we perceive reality. It was more real than reality. Then, I worked out pi to 4,000 decimal places and realized that if anyone ever drew a truly perfect circle, it would actually look like a straight line to our eyes. I looked at the silver pill container and realized it was more than 5,000 years old, or less than 4 seconds. And I think I highlighted that because I think it's endemic of the style. Like I feel like this passage was written to try and flex in some way. And but so much of the text is like this that it just kind of turns into a chaos soup.
Yeah,
And we never get a good idea of exactly what the soy sauce does to them aside from that they it taps them into the paranormal.
it kind of does. You might have missed it because it was towards the end. One of the things that the guys explained is that they've created a living computer capable of analyzing all the various bits of data to predict the future. And that's what the soy sauce did, was it
Right.
gave them, it turned their brains into such a computer.
Yes. All right, last one. I am Korok. In the mountains of Uruguay, a goat gets its hoof caught in a post hole, and the bone snaps like a twig. The splinter juts from its skin, blood spraying onto white fur. It is stuck like that for 3 days. Finally, a wolf mother comes along, carrying her pup in her jaws. She lets the pup feed off the goat, gnawing bits of fur and skin and tearing at muscle. The goat feels it and screams, and there is pain, and neither the goat nor the wolf nor the pup understand their place in the machine. I stand above all and call them fags. I am Korok. Yikes. I just thought that was a really good example of a paragraph that both sucked and also had a completely random and useless use of a slur.
Yeah,
Okay, hit me with the explanation of the title.
this is a little bit of a mimetic uh, assumption here. Early in the chapter, when Arnie meets with Dave, he says, "Tell me about John." And then David goes on to say, "Do you know there's not a single person in the world named John Wong?" And that combined with Arnie saying, "You don't look Asian, Mr. Wong." I'm not. I had the name changed. Thought it would make me harder to find. You know, Wong is the most common surname in the world. So the explanation is that David Wong's real name in the story is John, and he, and at the end of the story, we learn that he's dead and he's been replaced by a fake. I'm not sure I buy that. That seems like a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I just I mean, I'm willing to just file that under like, okay, bro.
Yeah. This is not an official explanation from the author, to be clear. It has it's one of those things where it makes sense within the text from a certain point of view,
Right.
but, yeah, I'm willing to bet John Dies at the End was just a catchy title that, made sense in 2004 or whatever.
I just wanted him to actually die at the end. I thought he was going to be the main character and that it was going to be a story where he just actually dies at the end of it. And I liked the spoiler title mechanic that I thought was going to happen, but it wasn't really that, even if it's meant to be more of a supernatural reveal type thing.
Right.
I'm just kind of scanning through. We've pretty much covered what we wanted to cover. As I said to you before we started the episode, I did feel like this was a book where I just didn't have a lot to say about it because the prevailing feeling that I had from page one to the last page was, okay, this is really crazy, but I'm not entirely sure like what it's serving. So I guess I would ask, like, did you find it entertaining?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it it definitely, yeah, it definitely entertained, although it mostly entertained in the way that it was like, I have to think I had to think about what was going on. Like, none of the other books we've read have I had to like, some of them I've paused the audiobook and, like, thought about it because, something interesting, or really stupid had happened. But this was the first one where where I had to, and I probably should have done this more, I had to rewind a couple of minutes to make sure I understood what was going on. And it was just a very dense, very, I mean, as you said, chaotic, rapid fire book. Ra breakneck pace, absolutely breakneck pace.
Yeah, I didn't find it very entertaining. I felt it was kind of a slog to get. It gave me very much the vibes of like if I took an undergraduate literature class on horror fiction that if I had taken this class in 2010 or something, that they might have put this on the reading list and it would have been like one of the lesser painful things that I had to read for the class, but still homework. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I guess that was my prevailing feeling on it. So I mean, are there any other major topics that you want to make sure and get out before we move into closing remarks?
I mean, did we wanna talk more about Arnie?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you have something to throw in about Arnie, for sure. Because and we didn't explicitly state that this is the first book that we've done that really has a straight up framing device where we have him telling the story to this journalist, and then we get a chunk of the narrative proper, and then we return to the diner and back and forth throughout the whole text. And I did like that. I tend to enjoy the framing device, and even in high fantasy, I think it's a really fun way to do things. Um, the King Killer Chronicles is one of my favorite. I mean, it's supposed to be a trilogy, but there's only two of them. But there's
Third
a
book's coming any day now, right?
yeah, yeah, any moment. Rothfuss is on it. He's just written a couple novellas in between, and they're definitely not fan service stalling for time. He promises. But anyway, that series does exactly this kind of a thing with the what I would call like a hard framing device, and Arnie essentially is listening to his story, and then each time the we return to the framing device, there's like it kind of functions the same way. It's where Arnie, I think, is a stand-in for the reader, and he puts to words what you must be feeling, which is, wow, this sounds like a bunch of fucking bullshit.
Right.
And then the Dave will show him something or say something or whatever to try and settle him, and then they move back into the narrative, and then at the very end, it's revealed that Arnie himself is a imposter, ghost, whatever.
Construct, yeah. It felt, very strange that Arnie would be based off of David's image of him versus his own. That seemed like that wasn't, and it's possible that we both missed that explanation. It just seemed like a really silly thing that was only discovered because the one truly, I think, truly defensible slur usage in the book, which is Arnie using it himself, reveals the truth. The fact that it comes unraveled like that, it just kind of seemed lazy.
I mean, I buy that. It because what was the conceit that Arnie was actually an African American person,
Yeah,
but the
he was an older, skinny black guy,
but he's
but
appearing to our main character as a white guy because he's a ghost.
right, because when David talked to him over the phone, he thought he sounded like an old white professory type journalist. And they even kind of call attention to it because John says his picture was at the top of all those articles I sent you from him. And
Right.
Dave was like, oops, I definitely didn't read those.
Yeah, I mean it seemed like I'll even put this in the column of it being like a strength of the writing. If his intention was to the degree of absurdity, make nothing that you read actually be what you think it's going to be, then he did a good job of that.
Right.
And he couldn't even allow the framing device to be what it seemed to be. Every moment of every page is this twisting and turning exercise in absurdity and chaos. And Arnie is just another cog in that machine.
Yeah.
Was it worse than Knight Errant?
It I don't think it was worse, but I don't think it was better.
I think I enjoyed Knight Errant more.
Damn.
I think I enjoyed that more. I think this has a higher degree of sophistication, but I just couldn't get into it. I think this is the wrong genre for me. I think that's the
Yeah.
thing I've learned more than anything else reading this book is my intuition that my because I don't think I've ever read a horror novel of any description. But of course, you know, over the years occasionally I have seen a horror film here and there and I just don't like them. And
No.
now I know that that dislike for the film genre extends into my desires and predilections for what I want to read. So I know that if I see another novel or you recommend a novel for the podcast or whatever that has the horror tag that I for the first time in the history of the show, I will exercise my veto privilege.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about that too much because I'm in the same boat. I don't usually like horror movies, and I didn't find myself enjoying this horror novel. I think I am going to check out. He's got another series, the Zoe Chronicles or something like that. I'm going to see if that's less horror, but I won't necessarily propose that for the show anytime soon.
Yeah, so even though I would say that I didn't enjoy this book, I would totally read something else that he wrote in a different style or genre. I think there's definitely a skilled writer here. I just don't like what he did with his skill in this case. It wasn't for me. But that's totally subjective. If you unabashedly like toilet humor, you're a big fan of, you know, late 90s to early 2000s pop culture references and you love horror flicks and you dig movies or books that have tons of body horror, so on and so forth, this book could absolutely just be a slapper for you.
If your favorite part of Dogma was the shit demon part, then have we got a book for you?
Have we got a book for you? Yeah, Shit Demon the novel. Next
Yes.
time, next time we will be reading A Tempest of Tea, the first book in the Blood and Tea series by Hafsa Fazl. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. It's Hafsah, the first name, and then Faizal for the second name. I'm not sure what the origins are of the author, but I think this is a more traditional fantasy novel with, I think, some political uh, elements. I think the blood and tea thing is kind of like an assassination type deal, but I'm going from memory, so it may or may not actually include that. But that is what we will tackle next time around, and yeah, we hope
Yeah,
to see you then.
I read the description of it as I was purchasing it on Audible, and yeah, it seems like it's more of a Victorian setting,
Yeah,
which I think should be interesting. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
yeah. I don't think we've done anything with a Victorian backdrop yet on the podcast.
No, we kind of do traditional fantasy or like modern contemporary setting.
Yeah, I guess some of the urban fantasy we've read doesn't have a huge amount of. No, I guess they've all had cars, right? So it's all pretty much straight up modern,
Yeah.
you know, late 1900s, early 2000s technology level.
I think if we assume John Dies at the End takes place around the time it was written, it takes place the furthest back in time while still being modern of any story we've read. So,
Yeah, because I
uh,
mean, there are cars, but they could have been cars in the 60s.
right.
They're,
And it's pretty clear everyone had flip phones and they were shitty.
oh,
There
okay.
was
So,
even
so
a
at least it
shitty
had,
reception.
yeah, so it had to be at least modern enough to have cell phones.
Right.
Yeah. So that's it. That was John Dies at the End, and next time is Tempest of Tea. And yeah, we hope to see you in the next episode. Hey, thanks for listening. You can follow us on Twitter at Staff Trenchcoat. Look for us on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to shoot us an email at staffandtrenchcoat@gmail.com if you have a book recommendation. And we hope to see you in the next episode.